Let's take a look at how to add, delete, and move the columns, rows, and cells that you have within your spreadsheet. So I have a few demo tabs set up. So let's start with adding. This could be adding a column, adding a row. It's very simple to do so. Of course, I could continue and just type some more data here, but let's say that maybe I wanted to have that row be in between one of these rows. What I would do is I would right click on the column, or you can right click on the row, and you'll see the option to insert, in this case, a row above or below. For columns, you would see the option to insert a column to the left or to the right. So let's add one here to the left. So we could use this to put other information here. You could also add multiple. So let's say that I wanted to add more breakfast foods to the list, and I didn't want to have to go and just repeat this process of inserting a row 4 or 5 times. What I would do is I could just highlight with my cursor these 4 rows, and then when I right click, I'll see the option to insert 4 rows above or below. In this case, I want to create that space at the bottom of the list so that I can add more items. All right, so that is how you can add. If your mouse isn't that great or you're having dexterity issues, you can go to Insert, and you can also use this option instead of the right click. And if you're working with students, and we know that most of our students are using Chromebooks, and it can be difficult to explain how to right click on a Chromebook, you could just tell them to use their cursor and then go to Insert, and then they would see the option to insert rows and columns. You'll note because I have a row highlighted, that's why I don't see the column option. But if I went and clicked on a column instead, I would see the option to add a column. All right, let's go into our next example, moving and adjusting our data. So we have some sample students here with their averages and their attendance. And so let's say that I would like to move some of that information. So I want to actually move the absences to the left-hand part of the gender column. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. I'm going to show you both of them. The first way is to go to Edit, and you'll see the option to move. And what do you want to do with this column? We want to move this one to the left. Right? You can also manually drag that, and I'll show you how to do that with a row. So let's say that Daniel LaRusso, I want him alphabetized where he should be in this list. Now, I could certainly go to Edit and Move, but it only lets me move it up one at a time. So for moves of one, the Edit menu is really helpful. But if you're moving multiple spots, it's better to click on the row number or the column number till you see this, kind of your cursor turns into a hand, and then you're going to drag that up. You can see that line, and this is where I want it placed, so I'm going to let go right here. Right? You can also move cells. So for example, let's say that I've totaled the absences here. This is actually a formula, but it could just be type, but it does work with formulas as well. And let's say I want the total absences to appear here. What I'm going to do is click on this cell, and I'm going to move my cursor up to the top edge, and you'll see that the hand icon appears. Then I can click on my mouse, and I can drag that cell and move it to where I would like it to be. All right, and finally, you're probably noticing that I have some issues with data here. This doesn't fit within the cell. This doesn't fit within the cell. So what I can do is click on a column where the data is not fitting, and I can right click and resize this column. And instead of experimenting with entering a width in pixels, because I'm not really quite sure what that proper width is, I can click fit to data, and then you'll see that the column will be adjusted. And I can do the same thing here. Actually, let me go here, right click, resize, and just do a fit to data. And then that makes sure everything fits in nicely. All right, and then last, deleting. That process is pretty much the same as inserting. So if you want something deleted, you would right click on a row or a column, and then you would see the option to delete. So that's for the row. Maybe I don't want the time involved here. I can just delete this column and then it disappears. And remember, we have these undo and redo buttons here if we want to undo any actions that we've already done. You can also delete cells and shift them up. So let's say, for example, that I just decided I wasn't eating bacon anymore, and I wanted to delete this row because that's not going to be a food. That's not going to be a food list that I'm in the food list that I'm tracking. I can hit delete, but you'll notice that just took away something from the log that I had eaten that day. So that's not the best option. So I'm going to undo that. And instead, what I would do, instead of deleting the whole row, because there are things in the row that I'd like, I'm going to highlight what I want to be gone. And yes, I could hit delete on my keyboard, but it leaves this empty gap here. So instead of doing delete row or delete columns, I'm going to do delete cells. And then what I'm going to choose is I want the cells to shift up. What that's going to do is it's going to get rid of that entry of bacon. Why we'd want to do that, I don't know. That's just the example here. And what's going to happen is all the data below is going to shift up and fill that spot. Basically, someone leaves the line, someone fills the spot, and you'll notice that the food log on the right is not affected when I click this button. All right, and the same rings true when inserting, which I did not show you on the add tab, but let's say that there was a breakfast food here. Maybe I wanted to add tea in this space. I could insert cells and then shift down. So what I want to do is I want to create a space in between coffee and eggs without impacting my food log. All right, and I can shift cells down and then leave space for me to include another item in my list. So that is how different ways you can add, delete, and move items within your spreadsheet.